Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever it is time that you have a chance to do your lesson. It's good to see you guys. I hope yesterday you had a chance to go over subtracting linear equations and watching the tutor videos and doing the got it problems. Today I'm going to go over the got it problems and the guided practice, so hopefully that might help stop any confusion that you may have from yesterday. So make sure you've turned your book to page 310. You have your paper in front of you that you worked on yesterday so that you have to see where you might make a mistake or if you got it correct or not. So when you first have our equation here, this is subtracting because we have our subtraction sign in the middle. Before our long break, we were working on adding linear equations. So when we add linear equations or subtract linear equations, we always combine the like terms. Our like terms here are the 7x and the 2x, and then your numbers without a variable are alike. What you do with the y, or the subtraction sign, is because the subtraction sign is in front of the next parentheses. It's like you're multiplying each of these by a subtraction sign. So it'd be like negative times a positive is a negative. So that now became negative. A negative times a negative is a positive. So that is now a positive 1. So if I have a positive 7 and a negative 2, you actually subtract the 2. So 7 minus 2 is 5, and you keep the x. Then we have a negative 5 and a positive 1. If we have the negative 5 and the positive 1, we subtract because they're a positive and a negative. So 5 minus 1 is 4, but you keep the sign of the higher number, which would be the negative 5, so our answer is a negative 4. 1b, we have 6x minus 4 minus the quantity of 2x minus 4. Like terms, we have the 6x and the 2x, and we have a 4 and a 4. Before we go any further, you need to take this negative sign. It's in front of a quantity, so we have to multiply it. So a negative times a positive becomes a negative. A negative times a negative becomes a positive. Now I can combine. Now I can do my like terms. So 6x and a negative 2. One's positive, one's negative, so you subtract, keep the sign of the bigger number. So 6 minus 2 is 4. The sign of the bigger number is 6, so it stays positive. And you keep the variable with it. A negative 4 and a positive 4. One is negative, one is positive, so you subtract. 4 minus 4 is 0. You do not need to put a plus 0. Just leave it as 4x for your answer. So leaving that as your answer is fine because we don't want to add the x. Turn the page and look at your next got it problems. We are at 2a and 2b. So again, you're going to combine the like terms. We have our x's, an x and a 2x. If an x is alone, it's like having 1x. So, and then we have our negative 5 and our negative 1. But before we do that, make sure you distribute that negative sign. It's like multiplying through by a negative. So a negative times positive is a negative. A negative times a negative is a positive. So now I have a positive x and a negative 2x. So one's positive, one's negative. You need to make sure you subtract. So 2 minus 1 is 1. But you're going to keep the sign. So it's a negative 1x. A negative 5 and a positive 1, you're going to subtract. So 5 minus 1 is 4. Keep the sign of the bigger number, which is the 5, so it's a negative, so it'll be a minus 4. Now, a better way to clean up this equation is to get rid of that 1. So we're just going to say a negative x minus 4 for my final answer. 2b, same thing. We keep doing the same thing. We have the like terms, 6m, 4m. We have a whole number 3 and a negative 1. Before you get started, distribute the subtraction sign. So a negative times a negative makes that a positive. Okay? A negative times a negative makes that a positive. Now I go through. I have a 6m and a 4m. They're both positive, so you just add. So it'd be 10m. Positive 3 and a positive 1, you just add, so that becomes a positive 4. Making sure we distribute the negative sign first before you combine like terms. When you combine like terms, you're adding whether they're negative or whether they're positive. (3b), we had in the got it problems in 3, we had a story problem. It says, after working X hours on Monday, Kay earns $9X. On Tuesday, she earns the quantity 7X plus 3. So we need to write an expression to represent how much more money she earned on Monday. So on Monday, she earned the 9X. So we're going to start with 9X because that's Monday. Then we're going to subtract what she earned on Tuesday. And on Tuesday, it was the quantity 7X plus 3. So the equation to find the difference between Monday and Tuesday, it would be 9X minus 7X plus 3. So that's our equation. And in part B, it says, if she worked 5 hours each day, how much more did she earn on... Wait, let's simplify this before we go on to part B. Let's just go ahead and simplify this. So we have the 9X and the 7X, but we have to distribute the subtraction sign. So that's a negative times a positive. This now becomes a negative. So 9 minus 7 is 2. Keep the sign of the bigger number. So it's 2X. And then we have a negative 3. So it's minus 3. So that's our simplified equation. We could have done part B, leaving it here and answered it, but let's just get used to, I guess, simplifying it first. So when they said on part B, she worked 5 hours. So we are going to have 2 times 5 minus 3. So what's 2 times 5? 10. And then 10 minus 3 is 7. When you show your work, I want to see step by step. I want to see each line telling me that you know how to do it. I know some of this you can do in your head, but I want to see every line to your final answer. Okay? You had the option to either do the guided practice yesterday or the quick check. I assume many of you did the quick check, so today let's just do some examples of the guided practice. If you would, pause the video for a second, look at the guided practice on page 312, and complete 1 and 2. When you're finished completing 1 and 2 on your own, unpause the video to watch and see how I got the final answer. Okay, I hope you've done it on your paper or whiteboard, whatever you have at home that you're working with. And we are going to start by doing what? Combining like terms. 6X, 3X, a 5, and a 1. Distribute the negative. Show me that you're making that a negative. Show me that you're making that a negative. And if you want to cross that off, the addition sign off at this point, or scribble it out, that's fine. But make sure I can see that it was there. Then we combine 6X and a negative 3X. Well, one's positive, one's negative, so you're going to just subtract. 6 minus 3 is 3. You're going to keep the variable there with it. 6 is the greater number, so we're going to keep it positive. We have 5 and a negative 1, so one's positive, one's negative. You're going to subtract. 5 minus 1 is 4. Keep the sign of the bigger number, so it's plus 4. Hopefully, after you practiced and tried it, that you guys got 3X plus 4. Part 2, in the guided practice. I'm circling my like terms, underlining the other like terms because they don't have a variable. I'm going to distribute my negative sign. So this now becomes positive and this now becomes a negative. So I have a negative 4 and a positive 2. 4 minus 2 is 2. Keep the variable. Which sign do I use? I use the sign of the bigger number, so it's going to be a negative. I have a positive 2 and a negative 1, so we're going to subtract. 2 minus 1 is 1. Keep the sign of the bigger number, so it's adding 1. Hopefully you also got number 2. Go ahead and pause the video again and do numbers 3 and 4. With 3 and 4, to complete this, it's the same thing. Like terms, they both have x's. Other numbers without an x. Distribute that negative sign. So now that positive becomes negative. This positive becomes negative. So we have 9x minus 2x becomes 7x. A negative 4 and a negative 1 becomes a negative 5. Number 4. You know what? I'm going to pause this for a second. I wrote it down when I wrote down the problem wrong. This started negative. So let me redo that. Okay? And that would be the first mistake of video number 1. So this started negative. So if that started negative, it now became positive. So the 9x plus 2 is 11x. A negative 4 minus 1 is a negative 5. Now maybe you guys got it right. See, that's the importance of when you copy down equations or anything in math, that you want to make sure that you're writing it down correctly. Otherwise, you're going to make a simple error, which I just showed you that I did. But it happens to all of us. Number 4. I'm going to make sure I wrote it down correctly and take a look real quick. Okay, I think I did. Usually you guys check and notice that in class. So I have 2x plus an x, and then I have a 7 and a 1. Distribute that negative. So now this becomes a negative, and this also becomes a negative. So I have 2x minus x. It just becomes an x. Some of you want to put a 1x. 7 minus 1 is a positive 6. Clean up the problem and just make it x plus 6. Take a second and try to do number 5. So pause the video, do number 5. All right, number 5 has a story problem with a chart that you have to read the chart. And it asks for, it says the cost of shipping an item that weighs X pounds from Charlotte to Chicago is shown in the table. So here is the table that I copied from the book. Part 8 says, write an expression to represent how much more Atlas charges than Mid-Atlantic for shipping an item. So we start with Atlas, because how much more did Atlas? So I would have the quantity 4x plus 280, and we want to know how much more, so you're going to subtract 3x plus 1.25. You're going to combine like terms. Circle what's alike, underline the other two that are alike. Distribute your negative. That becomes a negative. This also becomes a negative. So then I have 4x and a negative 3x, which just becomes x. I have 2.80 and a negative 1.25. So one's positive, one's negative. I'm going to subtract. So that becomes, and I'm going to take the sign of the 2.80 because that is a greater number. So it's going to be a positive 1.55. Okay, that's part A. Part B says, if an item weighs 2 pounds, how much more does Atlas charge for shipping it? Okay. if I want to, if it's 2 pounds, you just put 2 plus 1.55, which then would be 3.55, and that's your final answer because you solved this problem. Some of you might have gone up to the original problem, this original equation, and did 4 times 5 plus 2.8, that's all in parentheses, minus 3 times 5 minus 1.25. If you did that, that's fine. You come out with the same answer, but it's so much quicker once you simplify the equation. So if I did that, that would be, if I finish filling that out, that is, oh, I'm sorry, the 5 should be 2 pounds. So that would be an 8 plus 2.80, which is 10.80. This is 6 minus 1.25, which would be, because it's a negative, because I have to bring that negative inside there, that becomes a positive, so that's a plus. And they're negative, so it's a negative 7.25. And I just subtract 1080 and 7.25, and I get this final answer. Either way is fine, but look how many more mistakes you can make keeping it the long equation than just simplifying it, combining like terms, and solving the problem. Tomorrow, if you need to, look back at this video. You're going to be doing some IXL problems. If you choose to, if you don't have internet at home, you can continue working on page 312, doing the independent practice, as many problems as you can get done in 15 to 20 minutes. I hope that today helped you get along the way, and I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day and stay safe, and we'll see you again.